that brings us all together at 2 p.m. every day to listen to new speakers and to new subjects. Friends, wouldn't it be a different world if everybody thought the way we did? If everybody spontaneously conformed to our wishes, our thoughts, and our every feelings? Since life doesn't work that way, we would do well if we knew the art of negotiation. In a negotiation, after all, neither party holds the aces. Instead, negotiations should proceed on a rather level playing field. Today's subject of discussion is the art and science and discipline of negotiation. And we have with us an illustrious panel to give their ideas on the same. To start with, we have with us Ashish Bhasin, a well-known personality in the advertising and media industry in Asia Pacific for the past 32 years. He is presently CEO APAC and Chairman India Dentsu Aegis Network. He is also a member of Dentsu.
Ashok Bhai has got
700 member powerhouse. Oh, I was muted. Okay, is okay?
Ashok bhai, you can go on. Accidentally, you got muted.
Okay. And an astute businessman, he built the Dentsu Aegis network in India from a 50-member to a 3,700-member powerhouse, now the second largest in India. Prior to this, Ashish successfully led and set up several Lentus India businesses for 20 years and has also had the global role of the Executive Vice President, Low Worldwide and Asia Regional Director for Integrated Marketing. He has numerous awards to his credit, and he serves or has served on many industry bodies in India. Ashish has recently been conferred a PhD for outstanding contribution to advertising and media industry. We also have with us Bhaskar Bhatt. He was the MD of Titan Industries and is presently the director of Tata Sons and Rallis India and many other companies. I have had the privilege to interact with Bhaskar on numerous occasions. The jewelry division of Titan was struggling when in 2000 Bhaskar took over from Xerxes Desai. And by 2002, he had turned around Titan's jewelry division called Tanishq from a market capitalization of $45 million to $3.5 billion. And in the same period, an annual revenue which jumped up from 150 million to 1.74 billion, while profits mushroomed 118%. Bhaskar brought Tanishq back from the jaws of death onto the road to success. An amazing personality, a wonderful human who left a lasting impression wherever he went. We also have with us Rohan Shah, a practicing counsel in the Supreme Court of India and various high courts. Mr. Shah has over 300 important reported tax judgments to his credit. Rohan was given the Tax Lawyer of the Year award in 2019 by Legal Era Awards. He was closely connected with our industry for over 20 years and has helped us in advising the gem and jewelry industry on most of its legal issues with the government and in sending the huge number of representations in all these years. He had also been a member of the high-level committee and has advised us and negotiated with the government on actually getting a 100-page high-level report, which was accepted by the government unanimously. And it was thanks to him that this was achievable. A wonderful person, a man with an amazingly big heart. We also have with us Rakesh Biani, a well-known name in the retail world. Rakesh ji is Joint Managing Director at Future Retail Limited with a demonstrated history of working in every respect and area of the retail industry. Strong entrepreneurship, professional skill in negotiation, business planning, demand planning, retail, and e-commerce. This panel shall be moderated by Biren Vaidya, a jeweler, a connoisseur, a man of intelligence and a man of great taste, the MD of Rose Group that has built a corporate with family values founded in 1981. The Rose Group today, under the leadership of Mr. Biren Vaidya, is the purveyor of jewelry, watches, and lifestyle accessories that range from fashion to high-end customized luxury. He started his business from selling to jewelers, and the group has expanded its operations to be India's leading organizations in lifestyle categories, in jewelry, in watches. And today, with 30 years of in-depth understanding of all customer segments from fashion to luxury, it is also internationally recognized and credited for its two pioneering retail concepts in luxury, the Rose Salon and the Rose Wash Bar. Over to you, Biren Bhai, to start your webinar today.
Thank you, Ashok Bhai, for the wonderful introduction for the four passionate visionaries and great leaders in their fields who I've had the great fortune to have as good friends. And I have learned a lot from them. And to be honest, this was one session that I wanted to have and share the knowledge that I have got from them with you. One of the things that I felt that I really learned from all of them was the art, science, and discipline of negotiation. And what better way to do it? And I decided that the topic is very interesting and unique. And when I called each one of them, the really touching part is, without a doubt, without a blink, they all agreed to be a part of this panel. And so we start with this unique topic, the art, science, and discipline of negotiations. My first question will go in alphabetical order. So I'll start with Ashish. Ashish, before I start, I was just going to, there's one more thing I wanted to do is, Ashok Bhai has introduced each one from a professional side and what they have done. But them being my friends, I want to tell you something that you probably will never know about them and what I have seen with them as a friend. So I'm going to start with Rohan first. Rohan, who the world is known as one of the top tax lawyers in the country, and has actually, for me, has been a person who has taken tax law, something which is very boring, and has converted into a true art form. I actually got this statement from a very, very senior bureaucrat who told me once that when Rohan comes to argue his case, he paints his argument in such a way that it becomes हमारे लिए बहुत difficult हो जाता है to go against him. वो truly an artist. So for me, Rohan is not just an art lover; he is an artist, and his paintbrush is the law.
Biren bhai, thoda sound jara loud karo.
Rakesh, on the other hand, is truly a visionary in retail. I met him 2 decades ago, and the first time I met him, I'd met him in his family office, and he is one person who's turned the operations that he has built into the world into a corporate in retail. So he's turned his family business into a corporate in retail. But the one thing that I know about him is that from the first time I met him, he has been always very, very much a person who believed in the science of retailing. And in India, I think he's one of the first people who started using data and analytics and making it into a science for retailing. So learning from him, I understood how data accumulation and data analytics can really, really help you in negotiating and building a business to success. He's a very, very hard negotiator and a fabulous leader. And that's what the success behind Future Group has been. Ashish.
Biren bhai, can you increase little bit volume from your side? People are unable to hear you.
Okay. Is it better now? Is it better now? Hello?
No,
yeah,
it is the same.
Little better.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, Ashish, I call him not only Ashish, but I call him King because I think he is truly the king of the new age advertising world. He has been a great visionary, and the success of his has been very different. He's always been in the corporate world. He's been a professional. but when I know him as a very self-disciplined, hard-working entrepreneur. So whichever business Ashish took on and whichever company he was in, he took the ownership of the business. And therefore, he ran it like his own. He never ran it like a job. And that was a real big difference in how he's been able to groom the business and make it grow. Ashish also has done something unique. Whenever he does negotiations, he doesn't do it from a job perspective or with commissions or how advertising agencies work. He's the kind of guy who sees business and smells business, and he goes into profit sharing with his clients. So he takes success in their success and failure in their failure. That's been one of his true negotiating skills, and that's brought success to the companies that he's been with. Bhaskar, all of you know, he's not only been the blue-eyed boy of Tata, but he's the blue-eyed boy of our jewelry industry, because he's not only going to be remembered for one in shaping Tanishq, Titan, and many of the Tata companies as an advisor and as a mentor, but he has actually changed the form of how the jewelry industry works in the past 2 decades. He has turned retailing in what we thought of retailing in jewelry as a kind of unorganized sector. He has organized it, brought in consumer trust through quality and standardization, amongst many other things that he has done. But I know him not only because of this great leader and mentorship that he's given, not only his team, but friends like me, but he is one person who I call an icon of humbleness. I've never met a man so humble, and also a person who believes in taking personal relationships to another level. The smallest man he may have met in the watch industry to the topmost person, he knows them by name and he talks to them in a language that they understand. Very, 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 very unique in a leader that I've ever seen before. So before I say anything more about these guys, because I can talk for hours and I could take the whole 1.5 hours, I'm going to start with the questions. Ashish, this first one is for you. So what, in your opinion, Ashish, is the most important of the three in negotiations? The art, science, or the discipline? Or do you think of a completely different angle besides these three?
Thanks, Viren, and thank you for the lovely introduction. I have to inform the audience that I think the reason Viren has invited me on this panel is not because I'm a good negotiator, because I'm probably the worst negotiator. Only once in I've known Viren for 45 years or so, only once in my life I've ever had to negotiate with him. I have to tell you this incident. My wife and I decided that she needs to buy an expensive watch, which by my definition was about 2.5 lakhs of rupees. We kept a budget. So I said, look, I've got a friend. He's the best guy. Let's go to him, and I'll probably be able to negotiate a much better deal with him. By the time we walked out, I had paid 3 times the price, and I had a wife who was so unhappy because I hadn't bought her, jewelry worth a lot more than that. So I'm not the best example for negotiations. Certainly, Viren is much better. But, I think that's the thing about negotiations. Obviously, Viren, it is all three of what you've said. It is an art, it is a science, and it does require a lot of discipline. But the biggest thing it actually requires is insights into human mind. One thing that we don't realize is that we are negotiating all the time. The best negotiators are your children. You just try saying no to them. Somehow, particularly if you have a daughter, somehow they will get their way around it, right? And it is a combination of all three. It is the insight that you have, how you relate to a human being, your persistence. There's a lot that's been written about negotiations. I mean, the best examples of these were during if you read any books on negotiation, it was about the Russians and the Americans during the Cold War, particularly. Now, in those days, the Americans would land up in Russia, in Moscow, put themselves in the best suites, book them for 2 or 3 days, near Kremlin in the best hotels, and get on with the negotiations. And the Russians were very smart. They knew that, okay, this guy is only here for 3 days. For 2.5 days, they would just not even bring up the topic, keep wining and dining them. And then the Americans were in a hurry to close it and go back. While the Russians, on the other hand, even if it was for 2 or 3 days, would get to New York and book a 3 months, one apartment or something, because they knew that they would find out. So it's about finding the human insight, having that patience. And the other thing about, and of course that comes with discipline, and it's an art and it's a science, but the other thing about negotiations, the one thing that you learn, and I feel very silly saying this to such a large bunch of jewelry experts who I think are the best negotiators. Jewelers are perhaps the best negotiators in the world. That your negotiation is never done. You know, if you're a blunt Punjabi like how I am, you try and say, look, 10 rupees. He says, no, 5 rupees. Okay, no, 7 rupees, and it's done. It's never done. It's an ongoing process. There will always be these. You'll hear about how do you add value. It's got to be win-win. Both parties have to feel good about it, etc. All that everybody knows, right? But I think the one thing we don't know is that you feel the other guy feels the deal is done, but it's not necessarily the deal is done. There's always some more value that you can extract from it. And the last point I'd like to make is that there is a big obstacle to negotiation, and that obstacle actually is your own ego. We lose negotiations not because we are not good negotiators. We lose negotiations because ego comes in the way. Good negotiators will never let emotion or ego clog what they are trying to achieve. It becomes, if it has become a prestige issue for you, if it's become नहीं मुझे ये करना ही है, हर हालत में करना है, अब तो इज्जत का सवाल है, etc. You will never be a good negotiator on that. So therefore, I'll sum up the answer. We'll come back to it, but I'll sum up the answer saying that it is all three of the things that you've said. But most important is understanding human behavior, human insights, and responding and reacting to that in a very human kind of a way.
Thank you, Ashish. That was a very, very well explained thing. And actually, not only your wife was unhappy, I was also quite unhappy that you just bought a watch and didn't pick up the jewelry. Anyway, the next question is to you, Rakesh. And the question to you is कि अपने COVID के time पे health improve करने के लिए we take up an exercise form or we are playing some kind of sport. But in the art and skill of negotiation, for net practice, what have you done to build your skill sets to become such a good negotiator? Rakesh, this question is for you. And if you can give a little bit of Hindi or Hindi English, it would be great. Rakesh, over to you.
Hindi is थोड़ा difficult है, but especially जब negotiation करना है तो और difficult है, you know. But Biren, I think, you know, can you really do net practice? The answer is no, yeah, you know. You can't do net practice. I think the net practice is you keep reflecting back into your experiences as to what happened in your past discussions, what happened in your past negotiations, how did you feel about it? Also, it's important to understand the fact that how did the other guy feel about it? Because the right negotiation is the one where both parties win, right? Because otherwise their contract is not going to get lived up to, right? So the balance is there. And frankly, I'm not too sure, you know, how do you evaluate it? And did you win in it or did somebody else win in it? Both parties have to win. There can't be a loser, because if there's a loser, then there is no negotiation which took place in the right manner. That's the way on it. So for me, if I have to sort of think about it, that what is my practice? My practice is keep reflecting back into the past, reflect back in terms of what was my discussions in the past with somebody, what did I do, how did the transaction get concluded, what was the result of the transaction, did it sort of meet the objectives that we had set off for ourselves at the beginning, and how did the other guy fare also. And as long as you keep reflecting into that again and again, what you find is the fact that you only polish your skills further. And as much as you respect the other side, you'll always get the best deal for yourself, which will satisfy you.
Very well said. So to sum up what Rakesh ji has said, it is that you reflect on all your negotiations in the past, because hindsight, you can always better your skill. So the best net practice that he has put is negotiating, in improving your skill sets in negotiating, is to reflect on your previous negotiations. If you look at hindsight, you can always better your game. But at the same time, I must add one thing. You have net practice at home. Ekta is a very good and strong negotiator, and I'm sure she gives you a good amount of net practice at home. Okay, so the next question is for you, Bhaskar. Okay, what do you do for pre-gaming? Do you have any SOPs? Hello, Bhaskar, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you do for pre-gaming before you get into any negotiations? Do you have any SOPs that you have set up for before you get into any negotiation, like homework, strategies, people research, etc.? So I'm sure that with your years of experience in business, you would have set up a very, very strong SOP before you got into any negotiations in the corporate world, and that you would have set up even for your company and your team to follow. So if only we could get a little bit of insight into that.
Yeah. So, I just want, it's a bit of a long answer, but let me just try and figure it out. See, for any, whether it's negotiation or any people to people, and Ashish knows this very well, I guess. I was reflecting on what you said, Ashish. Even if I'm giving a speech, in fact, I am looking at all of you, the mindset, I set my mind up until the last minute. I don't decide what I want to do, because I have to figure out where one of the three things will be important for this crowd. Not you, I'm saying any crowd, any person sitting in front of you. This is my take and this is my SOP. Are you trying to inform? Are you trying to influence? Or are you trying to inspire? In the sense, if the audience is just a set of school children, then I'm only trying to inform. So it's in negotiation or in face-to-face, one of the things I realized much late in life, so I want to only reflect on my last 7 months post-Titan, because the stories within Titan, and I can go on talking about. One thing I realized, the pre-gaming bit is, many of us think that there is a midpoint at which you close a negotiation. As in, like he said, 10 rupees, 5 rupees, 7.5, is that the midpoint, and everybody closes and walks away. To me, it is not like that. And I said, late in life, I realized, what Ashish said, your ability to put yourself, आपका जो capability है दूसरे आदमी के जूते के अंदर जाने का, वो सबसे बड़ा capability मेरे को लगता है. चीज क्या है कि एक negotiation में हम सोचते हैं कि दोनों का ऑब्जेक्टिव एक ही है. जो लेट्स से प्राइस नेगोशिएशन हो रहा है, तो जो खरीद रहा है वो उसके माइंड में सबसे कम दाम में बेचना चाहिए, और बेच रहा है सबसे ज्यादा दाम में बेचना है. एक्चुअली कोई भी नेगोशिएशन में ऐसा नहीं होता है मेरे ख्याल में. हर आदमी का ऑब्जेक्टिव अलग है. एंड आई विल गिव यू एन एग्जांपल. आई डोंट वांट टू नेम द कंपनी. इट वाज अ वेरी बिग डील फॉर टाइटन. एक कॉस्ट का सवाल था, और हमने रिसर्च ये किया कि जो मेरे सामने जो आदमी बैठा हुआ है, जो फोन पे है, वो 3 महीने में ट्रांसफर होने वाला है. बहुत बड़ी कंपनी थी, एंड एक नंबर था 18 करोड़ का नंबर था, और हमारे ख्याल में 18 करोड़ को 0 बनाने का था और उसको 18 करोड़ का 20 करोड़ बनाने का. ऑब्वियसली यही होगा ना. तो हमने एक बात, हमने जब रिसर्च किया और उस आदमी को हमने पहचाना, एक तो क्या है, ये मल्टीनेशनल में काम करता है, उसको 3 महीने बाद ये कहीं और जाने वाला है, तो उसके रिकॉर्ड में क्या होना चाहिए कि इसने सक्सेसफुली क्लोज किया. 2 बात है इसमें, सक्सेस और क्लोज. व्हाट इज मोर, क्लोज किया सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट है मल्टीनेशनल. एक $1 बिलियन प्रॉफिट कंपनी में 18 करोड़ कुछ भी नहीं, और मेरे ख्याल में 0 का was my objective. So I realized that other party had to close it and had to sign off. His bosses will be very happy. अच्छा, टाइटन के साथ हो गया, चलो 1-2 करोड़ रुपया निकल गया तो निकल गया, कोई बात. You understand my point? The objectives are never the same. You think he is trying to increase the price. I think I'm trying to reduce the price. Whereas that guy is, I'm talking about what Ashish said. That guy's personal drive would be 3 months later, I'm going to be in another place, or 1 month later. Understand that. Don't push him. So what I did simply was, boss, मैं इतना बोलता हूँ, and I had to use a little bit of थोड़ा arm twisting. I am on the Tata Sons board. I am on the Titan board. It will be extremely embarrassing if I have to go back and say, okay, Mr. ABC is not accepting our offer. It can affect so many things, etc., etc. At the same time, I'm telling you one thing. This is a tennis game. I have served. Now you return. I leave it to you. This is my number. I will never question whatever number you give. I will just walk away. Now the advantage in this is when the guy feels empowered and he knows he has to close it, I feel it works. Okay? Only because the insight on the person for me was such different from the union negotiations which I do in Hosur, very different, where the minds are very different. People are trying to rise in life, and therefore, so this is the preparation that I do. Last minute, till I see the man's eyes or hear his voice, I won't decide.
Okay, so Bhaskar, आपने बहुत अच्छी तरह से डिफाइन किया कि आप सब रिसर्च करते हो, होमवर्क करते हो, और वो सब जो होमवर्क और रिसर्च होता है, you go in like a juggler, you keep all those points and you keep juggling the balls till you get on the table to negotiate. And once you're there and you see the person opposite, then you play whichever ball you think is right to play at that point in time. And then you bowl that ball and see what kind of a return comes out of it. Very, very well explained. And of course, like you said, if you're negotiating with a multinational or you're negotiating with a union, you have to understand the mindset of the person on the opposite side. Very well explained. My next question here is going to go to two people, but first I'm going to start that question with Rohan. Rohan is not only a great artist, but he's also a film buff and enjoyed films and especially old films. So I'm going to take you back to the famous film Diwar. In Diwar, you had that famous line where Amitabh Bachchan says, "Mere paas sab kuch hai, makan hai, paisa hai, tere paas kya hai?" And Shashi Kapoor said, "Mere paas maa hai." And one of the things in today's corporate world is the maa of all negotiations in the corporate world today is the legal team that you take with you for the negotiation. And that has become the all important. That is the real mark of how you will win a negotiation. The semantics of who is representing you makes a very, very big difference in negotiation today in the corporate world. What's your take on it?
Biren, firstly, many thanks for having me and giving me the chance to listen to such a learned panel. So, Biren, to me, when you talk of your legal team or any team which supports you in a negotiation, or you yourself go into a negotiation, I think the key factor in every negotiation is actually communication. And when we say communication, most of us think that if I am speaking and you are hearing, that is communication. And quite honestly, over time, you realize that, just somebody speaking and somebody hearing is not negotiation, nor is it communication, because ultimately, what is effective communication is that you not only say what you want to say, but in a way, you have to train yourself and school yourself to say what the other person is going to best respond to. It may not be exactly what he wants to hear, but it must be what he or she will best respond to. It is what he or she will find in a manner most acceptable and reasonable. So, when we look at negotiations, and I must say that, I've had the learning experience of negotiating for Indian multinationals and also for, let's say, the Japanese. And one of the things that you learn with the Japanese, with all their precision, while much of negotiation is, as Mr. Bhatt said, intuition, when you look in somebody's eyes and the body language you see, or, the signs you see. But the Japanese, had three very clear approaches. One was they would always have a defined purpose. What do I want to achieve from this negotiation, right? And it was never only one thing. There was always a purpose A, a purpose B, but there was always a purpose. The second situation was preparation. As some of the other speakers have said, you need to prepare. What is your position? What is the justification for your position, right? And therefore, preparation, including, what deals the other company has done, how have they come out of those deals? I think that preparation is important. But the most critical factor is people. Now, when you say people, you know, it could be, I mean, at home, it's your child, you know, in court, it's a judge, in a multi-billion-dollar deal, it's the key decision maker. But you have to understand that it is not only the one decision maker. He will have people around him who can influence him. And it is important that your message is going across, not only to that person, and not only does he see it as being reasonable, but those who are influencers around him also see it as being reasonable. And you know, one of the things that I learned really, which stayed with me, is that when you define purpose, many of us define purpose as a commercial goal. But it's very important that you have one more aspect to it. And I think if in the purpose you define it to say, I also want to walk away from this with goodwill, with respect and a friendship with the person that I'm negotiating with. If that is how you restate your purpose, of course you want to go away with what you want commercially. But if at the end of it, you are also aiming for respect, you are also aiming for friendship and relationship, you know, it makes a very, very big difference. And let me just give you one example of where I thought an absolutely brilliant negotiation was done. And, you know, this is at a global level, but it'll give us, I think, a good clue. You know, we used to go to WTO negotiations where about 143 countries come. And for many years, from 1994 till 2002, India was seen as a disruptor. You know, we were seen as the guys who objected to everything all the time. And actually, you know, to go with a series of commerce ministers to these meetings where in a way the people would avoid us. The moment we started speaking, you know, people would show body language which was very indifferent. That happened for a long time. Till 2002, we went to Cancun and, you know, Mr. Jaitley was our commerce minister. We were reaching a very critical stage, you know, and it was about food security. It was about, you know, agricultural interest. And honestly, we were not getting an opportunity to speak. And, you know, those negotiations end at a certain time. You stop the watch and you have a stopwatch negotiation. And everybody had very sharp polarized positions, you know, because it is national interest. Mr. Jaitley, you know, we were in a briefing room for 5 minutes. We were walking out, you know, and he said, Rohan, just leave this to me. Commerce Secretary was also there. Now he went into a room where everybody was talking about, you know, their interest. And he said, I urge everybody in this room that you have a unique power. You have a unique power to shape what will happen to human beings for the next 10 years. Let us not make this negotiation about your nation and my nation. Let us make this negotiation about the people of the world. And if this negotiation is about the people of the world, then it is high time everybody started listening to the developing countries of the world. It was 3 minutes, but what he said was so universal. And it played to two very important things. It played to the vanity of every negotiator, where everybody wants to feel he can influence mankind. And what he said was irresistible. Who could argue against saying that when we have the firepower of 143 nations and their ministers, that we should not do good for the people of the world? You know, when you negotiate, my experience has been from talking to my children to being in Supreme Court to going to global forums. Don't think about what you want to say. Think about what is reasonable and the other person wants to hear. But create one common agenda piece, which everybody says, yes, I want to support this. So, you know, those have been experiences, and it's been learning, and it is, of course, learning every single day.
Thanks, Ro. That was really, really a great example and such exposure of what happens in the world and in stopwatch negotiation. This is the first time I've heard of something like this, that how in that small critical moment, it's how exposed and how well your legal team can help you manage this. And taking it just beyond just commercial interest is very, very important. Very well said. But yet the fact of the matter is, this is exactly the reason why the Ma is most important. The legal team that supports you is always very critical. in every negotiation. Okay, so my next question is going to be towards the ad man, the king of advertising, Ashish. This question is, in negotiations, first impression, appearances, body language, visual semantics play a very important role or not? But before you answer this question, Ashish, I must give the audience here एक बहुत ही अच्छा एग्जाम्पल दूंगा जो मैं जब भी एक एडवर्टाइजिंग एजेंसी के साथ नेगोशिएट करने गया था, और हर एडवर्टाइजिंग एजेंसी का कस्टमर लिस्ट होता है, रेफरेंसेस के लिए आप उनके कस्टमर्स को पहले पूछते हो कि ये एजेंसी कैसी है। तो जब भी मैं बात कर रहा था सब जो उसके कस्टमर से, जो मेरे फ्रेंड्स भी थे, और उनको पूछा कि भाई ये कंपनी कैसी है, तो उन्होंने मुझे कहा, दिस वाज अबाउट 2 decades ago, कि आदमी अच्छे हैं, कंपनी बहुत अच्छी है, मगर उसके लॉयर है ना सॉलिड है, संभाल के नेगोशिएट करना, लॉयर बहुत सॉलिड है। तो आई वेंट एंड स्पोक टू द अदर गाय, सेम रेफरेंस, फैंटास्टिक कंपनी, आदमी बहुत अच्छा है, कंपनी बहुत अच्छी है, मगर लॉयर से संभाल के रहना, लॉयर सॉलिड है। तो बिफोर आई वेंट टू द थर्ड पर्सन, आई वाज वंडरिंग कि साला लॉयर इतना सॉलिड है माने क्या, नेगोशिएशन में संभाल लेना, लॉयर बहुत सॉलिड है। तो आई आस्क्ड द थर्ड गाय, भाई, बोला कंपनी फैंटास्टिक है, आदमी बहुत अच्छे हैं, मगर लॉयर सॉलिड है। सिंह, हाँ सर, आपको कैसे मालूम? सो ऐसे मगर सॉलिड माने क्या? सिंह, सर वो उसमें है ना एलिजाबेथ टेलर और ऐश्वर्या राय दोनों साथ में मिलके है। सो आई सेड, अच्छा। So what we understood that his lawyer was not only very sharp and amazing, but also very, very beautiful and very solid. So it was very difficult to negotiate with this company. So I did the next best thing. I took the Dilip Kumar of the legal world with me. I asked Rohan Shah to join me for that negotiation. Ashish, to take you from there to the point of how important is appearance, body language, and first impressions in negotiation.
Look, I think ये मैं हिंदी में बोलता हूँ क्योंकि कई लोगों ने लिखा है कि हिंदी में बोले, तो मैं हिंदी में बोलने की कोशिश करता हूँ। आई थिंक जो आपकी अपीयरेंस, एंड ज्वेलर्स से अच्छा ये कौन जानता है और आपसे अच्छा ये कौन जानता है, जो आपकी अपीयरेंस होती है वो नॉट ओनली नेगोशिएशन में बट किसी भी चीज में बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट होती है। क्योंकि जब आप किसी को मिलने जाते हैं, आर्मी में वो सबसे ज्यादा क्यों बोलते हैं कि आप अपने जूते शाइन करें और शेव जरूर करें, अनलेस यू हैव अ बियर्ड, अदरवाइज दैट्स वन ऑफ द फ्यू थिंग्स यू कैन बी कोर्ट मार्शल्ड ऑन। The reason for that is when anybody sees you, he first sees your face, looks into your eyes, and then looks at your shoes. And by the time you have even walked in or settled down, that person has already made a lot of impressions about you. You know, as human beings, however unbiased we tend to be, but in reality, हमारे अंदर बहुत biases होती हैं, perceptions होती हैं, right? अभी एक आदमी एक तरह से कपड़े पहन के आया है, एक तरह से चल रहा है, एक तरह से बातचीत कर रहा है, तो हमें उसके बारे में ऑलरेडी एक प्री फॉर्म्ड ओपिनियन आ जाता है और वो हम उसको अपने माइंड में फिर उस हिसाब से उसके साथ हम रिस्पॉन्ड करते हैं। तो इसलिए किसी भी चीज में, नेगोशिएशन में नहीं, अपीयरेंस बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होती है। बट नेगोशिएशन में एक अपीयरेंस के अलावा, सो देयरफॉर इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, एंड दैट डज नॉट मीन दैट यू हैव टू बी, everybody can't be a Dilip Kumar like Rohan, who I've known for years and is always immaculately dressed, or you. But at least you have to be smartly turned out so that the person knows that you're taking it seriously. But I think even more important than that is that your demeanor, your body language must communicate trust, right? Now, whether there is real trust or whether you're putting it on is a separate thing, though it's very hard to put on trust. But whatever you do, it must inspire trust and authenticity in the person opposite you. Wherever if I'm telling you something, and if you may agree or disagree, but if you feel I'm authentic, I'm genuine about what I'm saying, there is a different human to human relationship that forms over there. It is a part of appearance, but it is more a part of your demeanor, your way that you approach things, and also whether you're walking the talk. If you say something but are doing something else, that's not, and people are very sharp in judging this. You know, I read this in a book, but I tested it on myself. By the time a person actually walks into your room, settles down and has had a cup of coffee, if you're interviewing somebody, even for a very senior position, 9 out of 10 in your mind, you've already decided whether you want that person or you don't want that person. Because it's that much of a difference. And you're trying to tell yourself, keep your biases away. Don't, this might be whatever deceptive, but that's natural. And some people really know this well and really handle this beautifully. And by turning out well, I don't necessarily mean that you have to be suited, booted, or whatever suits you. I think the best negotiator in history that India has ever had has been Mahatma Gandhi, and all he wore was a dhoti with a danda and not even a shirt. Nobody, the whole British Empire could not negotiate with him. So it's not that you necessarily have to wear an expensive suit or whatever, but the authenticity, the genuineness, and the first impression, whatever you want to communicate. Now, when I see Biren, I see those imported fantastic Oxley specs, and I see that, the stick that he carries with a silver jaded kind of head cap on that. I've already formed an impression about Biren of what it is, right? So I think we tend to underestimate this. In communication, they say 92% of communication, and there are many studies that back this, is actually not non-verbal. At this moment, what I'm telling you, which you're listening to, only 8% of that you're decoding because of the words I'm using. 92%, if you're seeing me, 92% of it you're actually decoding from the verbal cues or from what my body language is communicating to you. And that holds true for negotiation also.
Thank you, Ashish. And yes, I realize you formed pretty much an impression about me. And probably is that the reason why we've been such dear friends for so long. Anyway, thank you very much. It was a good perception and a complete angle. It's not necessarily about what you wear, but how you carry yourself. The body language that you give, the personality that you create, the aura that you work around, it always helps, because 92% is decided of what you feel about that person before he's had his first cup of tea. Very well put. And now the next question is for you, Rakesh. What's your take on who should be on the driver's seat during the process and the closing of the negotiation? Do you feel you should have the control in your hands, or create the illusion that you have the control and let the other person feel he's won? What do you think is more important? And how do you play this out?
I think for me, if I'm going to be sort of doing negotiation, for me, what's more important to me is that what is it that I want to get out of that negotiation? I need to have complete clarity on that front, that what is my stop point? What is it that is a win for me? And that is more important. If during the process, if the other guy feels very clearly the fact that he's on the driver's seat, it doesn't make a difference to me. I think what I want to say is the fact that, I like what Ashish is saying very simply. As long as you are building trust and authenticity in your process of negotiation, and you are absolutely clear about what is it that you want out of that negotiation, you will have a conclusive end to that negotiation, which will make you feel very happy. Now, I think it's fair at times you want to sort of play a scenario where you make the other guy feel that he's driving the agenda. At times it can also backfire, right? Because maybe at times he sort of moves away from where his target was. So I think one has to be very careful. One has to sort of really go in a mechanism where you really build the trust upfront in the process. As long as you're authentic and clear and you're consistent in what you are going to be doing, the negotiation process ends much faster, right? You can't sort of keep dilly-dallying. It doesn't help at all in the process. So that's what my take on this is. Yeah.
So just to take that question a little further, I always known you as one of those guys who always believes in the facts, has tremendous clarity on what he wants. Like you just said, I have to have the clarity of what I want to get out of the deal. Then it doesn't matter whether I'm driving it or the other person is driving it, as long as I'm clear about what I have. But this impression of you, generally as a tough negotiator, makes people who come into deals with you with a lot of defenses ready, So you're coming in with all your nukes and all your armament, thinking कि आज राकेश जी के साथ negotiation करना है, तो सब defenses लेके चलो. And so because you being this tough negotiator, it generally also, yes, everyone knows that there's clarity required, but how does that work for you? Because people generally come well prepared with defenses when you're there.
See, I believe that I'm not a tough negotiator. I'm a fair negotiator. That's the way I look at myself, right? Because I definitely believe the fact that I'm not going to get anything that I seek for myself if I don't leave something else for the other guy. Okay. Now you may, and as I said, and I believe in my consistency and clarity, what I seek. And if that is sort of overwhelming for you, I think you need to work on your skills now, rather than me working on my skills.
Well said, Rakesh. Okay, now the next question, Bhaskar, is to you. People in the business world today believe that negotiations are like battles to be won. And what's your take on the fact, because you did say this before, that in a negotiation, relationships, trust building is important and fairness is important. So how important is this part of the Young Turks believing Bhaskar, that this is a battle to be won against the fact that trust, consensus, fairness, and a personal relationship building? Because I know that I have seen that wherever you build, a lot of people have personal relationships with you. You know practically everyone who's touched your life, about not only them, but their families, etc., and their businesses. So tell me a little bit about this, because this goes back as a prequel to as a sequel to your first question. So tell me what you think about this and how do you...
I don't know about business and so on. See, I'll be very honest. On a matter like this, my personal values override everything. Okay, on this, I'm not about negotiation. I'm talking about people, and the person sitting in front of you is a human being. Therefore, it overrides my values, override everything. So what I mean is that and people have already referred to this. It's nothing new. That is, I think Rohan, you spoke about defined purpose. Of course, we have to, like the Japanese, the defined purpose of the outcome, not for you, not for me. What do you want to, like when you're negotiating with the union, the point about personal relationships is as follows, which is my personal value. I don't think the employees in Hosur of our watch factory or jewelry factory want to be treated as, that last 500 rupees I want to give you or don't want to give you. If you can raise their thinking, this I learned from Mr. Desai, thinking big, which is those people also want to feel that they are contributing to a larger purpose, which is, look, this 500 rupees, if I give you, it's not going to break the company, it'll probably make you. But hello, in the long run, we are building the biggest jewelry business or the biggest watch business. Let's do it together. Now, this is an emotional appeal, but it has to be authentic. That is my point. If I make an appeal to the union leader saying, look, let's together come to a good conclusion, which in the long run is going to help many families in Hosur do better, but we may have to give up something today. People actually like to feel that they are working for a bigger purpose, okay, rather than close the negotiation because, at that time it was 2,000 odd employees waiting behind me, breathing down my back. Kitna negotiate karke kitna tumne bonus, what did you get for us? So I think that bit done very, very authentically. What I mean by authenticity is, I want to define this as a new theme for this negotiating. The person in front of you, you have to establish that you don't have a personal agenda. This is what I mean by that multinational persons in front of me. He had a personal agenda for whatever it was, that he had to quickly get to the new job, whatever the promotion, etc. The moment the other guy figures that you have a personal agenda, then the larger purpose goes out of your negotiation, and then there's a weakness on the other side. The moment the other person knows that this is not personal agenda, this is a corporate desire or a national, whatever. I remember when the GST was at 28%, Biren, there's a few months, I made a passionate appeal to somebody very important. I wore two watches, the Faveluba on my right and the Edge on my left. And I went and stood in front of the guy and said, sir, this brand we own, this brand we own. This Edge is the outstanding example of innovation in India. And this is a Swiss brand, which also we own, but we make it in Switzerland. But this suffers only 8% duty in that country. And here, what we make in India suffers 28% duty. And we are not a rich country like them. This is all I said. I'm not saying this won the day or didn't win the day. But that gentleman said, look, I don't understand what you're saying. But you know, the person who's deciding on this, she's in the next room. Let me take you there. So my point is the authentic, and he knew I was talking in the interest of the industry and not for titans, whatever. I'm not saying whether the, you know, after that, within 3 months, it dropped to 18%. You remember those days.
Yes.
Now, so the guy understood, and he's a very important person. If I tell you his name, you know, I don't want to bring him in. But the point is, he understood that I was not coming from a personal agenda. I was not coming from a Titan's point of view. There was an industry real. I mean, to say to the government, look, this is stupid to put 28% duty on watches would also be wrong. So my point is that I think authenticity, the purpose, defined purpose, and most importantly, that you don't have a personal agenda. If the other guy knows, I think that is my personal value system.
So just to take this question a little further, I wanted to ask you something. And this is very important to a lot of us who are running small, medium, and large jewelry firms here. Is one of these things that I have noticed and that you have put across a big conglomerate like Titan is the way you negotiate. Okay. And when people come in, there are people coming from all walks and different upbringings in life. And each one has a different way and thought process of negotiation. So a lot of the youngsters that come in, for them, it's a battle, a war that they need to win to prove themselves in the field of business and in the corporate world. How do you set your principles that this trickles down, that the negotiation is not a battle, but it is about winning fairness and trust?
So it is a very long answer, but the one fundamental value in Titan, which over 33 years is, I don't know, you're right, at the edges of the company, whether it is practice, I cannot promise. But there is one principle: unconditional, positive regard for people. All words are important. Unconditional, positive regard for people. So in any situation, we say it has to be unconditional, positive regard for people. So if a vendor is sitting in front of you, the positive regard is that there is fairness, that you're not treating one vendor with one set of metrics and another vendor with another set of metrics. Our franchisees, everybody knows that if you do X kind of turnover, you will get only this. It is an open page, okay? That is the point about a large corporation, that there are no agendas. Now, if you know the CEO, you'll get larger chunk, and if you know only the guy in the field, you'll get a lower discount. That is not. So that is the respect. But unconditional positive regard is when they are in trouble, everybody knows that we should be there to stand by them. It is not, therefore, you don't throw the book at people saying, देखो इतना ही मैंने आपके साथ negotiate किया था, इसके ऊपर कुछ नहीं हो सकता. It is very difficult to teach the young. They have to grow up in the system. Therefore, the open door policy and escalating, there are people in this I know who know that this is practiced in Titan. The number of phone calls I used to get, everybody knows that it can be escalated up. That last bit, which is the unconditional positive regard. So those principles help, Biren. I know I can give you a long answer on the processes that we follow, but the principle is what matters more.
Thank you very, very much, because that really, that one sentence of yours leaves a very, very important mark. The unconditional, positive, and regard for people.
Biren, yes. I just got a message from Rakesh ji. I'm going to log off now. I have to be on another call.
Biren, I need to be on another call at 3 for an urgent work. So I'm going to log off. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you,
Thank you.
Biren.
All the
Thank
best.
you.
We wish you crores and crores of sale, Rakesh.
I just hope so. Lockdown gets lifted and we can open many more doors, sir.
And that is not a negotiation. It's just a good wish.
Okay,
No,
can
but
I ask you one
your
question
wishes
before
me
you leave?
your wishes mean everything for me, sir. Thank you very
Rakesh,
much.
one last question before you go. We've had a lot of talk on human nature, psychology, etc., all playing in negotiations. But one of the things that I feel that is very, very important in negotiation is the fact that nothing is once in a lifetime. And therefore, to be having the guts or the balls, pardon my French, to be able to walk off the table and to be able to get off a negotiation. How important is that for you when you get into a negotiation deal?
I think it's important to sort of define where you have to stop, right? Because you can't get into a bad deal ever in life because it will hurt you a lot. So you should be clear on your goal. You should be clear on terms of the cushion that you have or where's the margin that you want to keep for yourself. But as you rightly said, it's not going to be the end of the world, right? And it's going to be important that you are ready to walk away from the table. And many times I've seen the fact that, when you're ready to walk away from the table, maybe a year later, the same deal happens at the terms that you want or even better. But that's also a reflection about your seriousness, and it's worthwhile doing it because never be so desperate in life. That's a weak starting point in a negotiation cycle. So you just can't start at a weakness at all, and walking away is actually a strength. It's a pillar which will help you discover a much better deal for yourself.
Thank you so much, and
Great.
wish you all the best for your next negotiation and next deal at 3 o'clock.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And
Bye.
thank you once again for being here at such short notice.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Rakesh ji. Thank you very much for sparing time for Mindspeak.
Okay, so now this next question that I'm going to ask is actually, it's going to be, let's Ashish start, and I want it from all the three panelists who are there, because this is a very interesting question. All of you have done great global deals, many, many global deals. And in your opinion, each one, I'd like to know, in your opinion, who are the best negotiators you have faced as a community globally and why? So Ashish, starting with you, and then we'll go in the line.
I've done about 25, 30 large acquisitions in my life, more than half of them outside of India. So you do end up negotiating, and every community has a very different style. The Italians will get very emotional, no, and pretend to walk away. They start, and 2 minutes later be back. The Americans will be very blunt and they'll say, take it or leave it or get lost from here, that kind of a thing. But the guys who are most amazing are the Japanese. And I'm not saying this because I work for a Japanese company. And what's most amazing with them is that they've got something called Nimawashi. What Nimawashi basically means is that, first of all, they're very, very diligent. They do their homework much better than what anybody else does, and they're meticulous to the T. What Nimawashi means is that they try to pre-align you even before the meeting happens. So in Japan, if you're going in for a negotiation and if you're 90% not already pre-aligned, then that's a wasteful meeting. So they try to get the win-win even before you have come there. And that's a very difficult process. It starts with a lot of sake, and the night goes longer and longer when you're in Ginza. And, every trick in the book, they'll wear you down. They'll do all sorts of pressure without you knowing that there is pressure. But they try to achieve Nimawashi so that before you have walked into the room, they've already aligned you to their way of thinking. And I think they're probably the best negotiators.
Rohan, what's your take on it?
Let me give a slightly different perspective. I'm not going to talk about global deals, but let me talk about people that I see every day trying to persuade and negotiate, for example, like in a Supreme Court. And, my situation there is, I think the common feature in everyone who's hugely successful is firstly their ability to simplify things. There is always an attraction to show you're clever. There is always an attraction to sort of show how much hard work and research you've done. But the people who make the biggest impact up front are the people who simplify things and, make it very commonsensical. The other situation, in court, which may not be so in a negotiation, where negotiations go on very long. But as Ashish mentioned, in recruiting, many judges tell you that actually they make up their mind in the first 3 to 4 minutes. And then they only indulge you for the next 7 days, and the chance of shaking them in the next 7 days is lesser than 1%. And, I have had many Supreme Court judges say it's the first 3 or 4 minutes, how you simply and rationally you put it to us. And the last thing, you see is that often in a negotiation and even in court, you'll have the other party, and let me say in this case, it is the honorable judges. Now, they say something, but you may be cleverer, you may be smarter, and, you can sort of say something which will embarrass them. But in every negotiation, as in every hearing, you have to ensure that the other party walks away with their pride and their ego intact. They walk away feeling like they are in control, and they walk away feeling that, they have their head held high. I think that's equally true of court as it is of negotiations. And, therefore, in that process, if I had to name people, I'm not naming, like Ashish said, the Japanese, but 2 or 3 people that I find absolutely remarkable, in this process. Obviously, in the Supreme Court, I find Mr. Salve is remarkable, and another person I find truly remarkable, is Mr. Parasaran, who not only talks law, but, talks a lot of Vedic philosophy, and the way people respond to that is amazing. In the Indian corporate world, and, I think recent examples sort of bears it out. They may have, some people may say they have a very aggressive style of, negotiating. But personally, and this is very personal, I have never sat across the table in a negotiation, but I have great admiration for how Mukesh Bhai, presents an issue and, how it evolves from there. Obviously, there is a much longer negotiation thereafter, but how he opens an issue and how he creates that commonality and synergy with people, I have always admired.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rohan. Bhaskar, what's your take on this? Which are the global communities that you feel are very important and have been fantastic negotiators?
Yeah, okay. I have 2 extreme answers. So let me just try and give you a very clear picture of how I've dealt. See, I think I have dealt with Germans, Americans, Japanese. To me, I have a little different experience as compared to Ashish with Japanese. Perhaps because of the stature of our company and the other company, etc. Whatever it is, I found the Japanese style, one is they are so hierarchical that some 20 fellows will be sitting in front of you when you're negotiating, whatever, when you're talking to them itself. And everybody has to give their card and, all that. And they come fully prepared, as he said, totally prepared, and they have answers for every question. However, what I found, at least with this company, was every time they would agree to, they probably have guessed where we want to be or where we want to go, and they'd agree, and they'll end up, you end up feeling good. Over a long period of time, and Japanese, I think very long term, And so over a long period of time, I'm saying 3-5 years, we realized we were giving in more because we felt, yaar, ye log ne isko bhi haan kar diya, usko bhi haan kar diya, abhi to maang hi rahe hain kuch din se. We stopped asking, literally, So over a long period of time, I felt they were such fabulous negotiators because you're not sitting with them all the time. The guys down the line will be doing the work later, And then you realize that the company's given away a lot of things because in the initial phase, they have given in to a lot of things. And a certain style was established saying, we are working in your interest, so aap jo bhi mangenge, de denge kind of style. At the end of it, they have actually got
what they want.
Okay, I found that fascinating, really fascinating. And I don't I don't grudge that. It has led to a beautiful relationship because we believe in long-term relationship building. So you're not suspicious, but you're pulling their legs, saying, now I know where you're going to go. But I think in that sense, the Germans are really, really good. They are so professional. They're so quality-minded. They are so on top of the subject, and they are so honest. As in, they will come to the point in the first place. If something is not acceptable, there is no argument. Sorry, Rohan and all, that, there's 23 reasons and quoting 150, past cases to come to one no, They'll tell you no in the first, आगे जाओ, ये नहीं हो सकता, So I found that not fascinating, it's something for Indians to learn. In the union negotiations, I've done some 7 negotiations, over the 20 years that I was doing HR. My first HR guy used to say, sir, don't close it in the first meeting. The employees think that the union has not done a good job if we don't have 7 meetings over 7 weeks. Because employees think, acha, itna jaldi ho gaya, that means you didn't ask. So each meeting, you should just sit in the room and for 2 hours and nobody says anything, but go out feeling very tired and that a lot of discussion happened. I learned the exact opposite from the Germans. I feel I like that style because, it is very cut and dry, very high quality, and I now, serve on the Bosch board. I know how it is. Everything is tight, yes, no, acceptable, not acceptable, willing to walk away. So, you can size them up. There are no veils in front of them. That is, and the worst, and I've always won, are the Americans. They think they are Texan cowboys, that they can have their way. And all the time they don't know that Indians are chalu people and they can figure them out. And they come with that Texan cowboy with 6 shooters and they shoot you out. They know that Indians can duck every bullet. And then Indians will pull out, what is that called? Whatever that churi, no? Rampuri. And so they're the worst. I've never found them. They think that money, power, and their articulation and their aggressiveness can win the day. It never is so. Never is so. And I've done one very big deal. And I know he gave me all the 4-letter words on phone, this, that, etc. So you just take it saying, that is what you are, this is what I am, lena hai to le. So I'm not saying I won or lost, I'm just telling you these are 3 different styles.
Okay, thank you so much. It was really good to learn. So Japanese seem to be very, very strong at negotiation. Germans seem to be honest. And one of the things that we learned about the Supreme Court is if you don't get it in the first 4 minutes, you can forget about it. Great learning from this. Okay, now the next question to you is, Ashish, towards you. Okay, so Ashish, when you are in the thick of the discussions and negotiations, what do you look for to hold the winning game? Over the years, have you built a playbook on this?
There can't be a playbook because every case, every instance, everything that you're doing is very different. It's always totally different in that. But there are certain commonalities that come in. I think one of the most important things to know is your, like Rakesh was just now saying, is your walkaway point. It's very easy in a negotiation to get carried away, and it's very easy, for the flow to take you, gusse mein aa jaoge ya ego mein aa jaoge ya taish mein aa jaoge, then you've lost it. So one of the common threads I've seen in good negotiators are they are very calm. Even if they look agitated, it is often a pretense. They are totally well studied, very calm, very controlled, and they are manipulating you. And in any negotiation, the biggest thing, I think one of the biggest difficulties to...
Hello?
Yeah, you can go ahead. I have muted Bhaskar ji once.
Okay. I think one of the biggest things to watch out for is that you often start competing with yourself without realizing it. You want to better it. You want to do. Don't want to look small. You want to look like you've come out a winner. So before you know it, you're actually not focused on the negotiation. You're focused on how good am I looking, what am I gaining, how am I coming out a winner, etc., etc. So I think that to me is a trap. Personally, if I see in my style, because all of a sudden it becomes a matter of life and death for you. I can't lose. How can I lose? It's my ego that gets impacted. And that then clouds and colors everything. And something what Rohan said, I think makes a lot of sense. To win the big battle, you have to lose small skirmishes. You have to give in a few things here and there so that it looks like the other guy has also got his face and got that. And that, I think, is a consistent trend across.
So very nice, Ashish. So every deal is a new game and each one has to be played differently. But the basic essence that you are saying is don't let your ego come in the way of trying to win all the time, and look at the bigger picture is what you've kind of said, if I had to summarize what you're saying. Rohan, the next question for you is that when you are making these deals and negotiations, when you are representing a lot of your clients in things, how important are the marriage points as compared to the divorce points of negotiation? Because, one of the things that I find very, very important, which I've learned over the years, is everyone is excited about doing the deal. So the marriage points are very easy to get over. The commercials, how are we going to do business, etc. But the real problem comes in is at the time of divorce, if there has to be one. So how important, in your opinion, as a legal mind, are these points in a deal?
Yeah. So Biren, the first thing when you get into negotiate something, it's very, very important that what is the nature of the relationship you enjoy with your client or your principal, right? Because one situation is, you act for, let's say, a very large corporation, and quite honestly, you're only a puppet. You will do exactly what they tell you to do. Those are quite difficult to do because ultimately you are actually nothing but a messenger between, the owner of one business and the owner of another business. And that's not the role that, somebody, at least somebody like me, would ideally want. But if you are in a position where you sit with your client to understand fully the character of your client, what are their ambitions in terms of their own morality, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. And if they respect you enough that you can tell them that, look, this is good and this is not good, and they will actually listen to it. And I think that's the first basis, building that relationship with the client. And those of you who are clients, finding somebody as your professional who has the time and patience to sit with you and understand all this about you, A, as a institution, and B, for the deal. Coming into those points of marriage and those points of divorce. Now, in every deal there are some things which are absolutely critical for the business to be able to go forwards. And as you mentioned, in some cases it will be technology, in some cases it will be brand, in some cases it will be marketing reach, manufacturing capability, management. Yes, all those issues will take your time, will take your effort. But ultimately, in that process, what you have to ensure is that the quality of the negotiation is such that it does not create bad blood in the future. Because you have to remember, when you hurt a person's ego, and this person, who's negotiating with you on the other side, there may be a Mr. A who's the chairman today, and there may be somebody else who's, not so senior. But I have actually known an instance where, something very hurtful was said to one of the people who was junior. 7 years later, that person became the chairman. And when we went into an arbitration, he actually took me aside and said, I will never forget what your chairman told me when I was a junior. Now, it's important to remember many of these human things, because ultimately, you know, contracts don't fight with each other. Human beings fight with each other. So when you talk of, therefore, you know, a divorce, the first thing is to invest all your time and energy to create a very good marriage. And think of divorce as only the default. Don't go in thinking there will be a divorce. But when you talk of, you know, divorce, and let me say what all companies are worried about, especially where you're giving away your business to another person or your brand to another person, is that, you know, in the process of the divorce, first you want it to be painless. You know, you don't want first a bad joint venture and then 20 years of litigation. So how do you create a mechanism that, okay, if we have to part, the parting is predictable, it is simple, and it will happen, you know, in a short time, because the shorter the time, the better that you will still all walk away, you know, as individuals and human beings. The second situation is what liabilities will come, right? And there is always a fear that, you know, the liabilities which will follow us are going to be very large, and the liabilities will now make the deal itself look bad. So typically you're worried about, are you giving indemnities? Are you giving guarantees of a type, you know, which will later on come and haunt you and, you know, cause you to actually have to make some significant payments. And really in that process of the divorce, again, you know, the last issue which comes up, but which again is a sort of very, very important issue, is are you, in the nature of both your initial negotiation when you formed the marriage or the joint venture, and, you know, how you conducted yourself, are you, you know, in the process of when you have to divorce or untangle, do the principals still have good enough chemistry to actually settle all the contentious issues? Because no matter how good your lawyers and no matter how many hundreds of pages are written, businesses will throw up issues which nobody had anticipated, either because technology changes, regulation changes, global environment changes. Like in COVID, you know, none of us have factored these in to agreements to say, oh, what will be all the consequences? So the other thing is, you know, while your lawyers can write everything, litigation is never the path. And the issue is, do you have, through the course of the marriage or the joint venture, still enough goodwill and respect that you can settle those issues which will come up, which are completely unanticipated? So, you know, while you obviously do everything to create a great venture and a great marriage, yes, you must anticipate, you know, for the divorce, but never, 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 and people will say as a lawyer, this is not something I should say, you know, rely on your lawyers to create a framework. But the relationship is what you have with your joint venture partner. And that relationship you must nurture, that even if you part, you know, you will form a settlement rather than have a litigation.
Thanks so much. Well put. And so we have the best, one of the best legal minds telling us litigation is not the way forward. And when you look into a venture, look at the marriage. Don't start planning the divorce, but make it clean and simple. Ashish, the next question is to you. In a deal, okay, one of the most important two phrases that I've had in my life is, one is, vulture is a patient bird. It's a scavenger. He waits very, very much till the end, till the person dies, and then he eats his food. So as a scavenger, vulture is a patient bird. So patience is extremely important in negotiations. But on the other hand, people always say, Lakshmi dwar pe aati hai, to muh dhone mat jana. So don't, when there's a good thing happening, don't go to wash your face. So how important is speed in these kind of negotiations and deals, and why?
I think it's extremely important, and the answer may vary about who you ask. I mean, a lawyer may have a very different perspective on it, but I think particularly in today's world, speed is of extreme importance. Of course, you've got to be careful because it's often hundreds of crores of rupees that are involved, particularly if you're doing any acquisition. So you cannot be haste and speed are two different things. But agility is. I know that I've got many deals in sometimes from literally under the jaws of our competitors, because we were more agile. We were able to take decisions much more quickly. If you're dealing with particularly an entrepreneur on the other side, the one thing that the entrepreneur doesn't want to do is to waste endless time on a deal. He's very clear भाई हाँ करो या ना करो, let me get on with my dhanda. You don't want to buy, fine, that's okay. Or you don't want to do the deal with me, that's okay. But let me know where I stand. They don't always have endless patience, because for them, their time is money, right? And they'd rather invest it in their business than in a deal which you don't know whether it will happen, won't happen. So agility is extremely important. On the other hand, you always have, processes, approvals, lawyers, and rightly so, because they've got to go through it with a fine tooth comb. You can take the vulture strategy, but I think I would rather go for the cheetah strategy, who waits very patiently. You can't even see where the cheetah is, and all of a sudden will spring on you and would have taken the prey and gone away, and you won't know where it is. My style on deal making with is slightly different. If I were to do a deal with you, and God forbid that ever happens, because I know I'm doing that deal, but if I were to do that deal with you, first, I would agree the commercial terms with you and me as human beings, agree upon it, put it down on a piece of paper in simple English, non-binding, no lawyer, no nothing. Well, this is my understanding. Is this your understanding? Make it as detailed as you want. Once that is in legal parlance, they call it MOU or non-binding LOI or whatever. They give it different names. But essentially, that's where English ends. That's where normal people's understanding ends. To me, that's the most important stage. I'd rather define everything, good, bad, ugly, and have a lot of agreements, disagreements, etc., but solve it out at that stage. Because frankly, after that, those 2 or 3 or 5 pages, you're going to hand over to very experienced lawyers who will convert it into 500 pages, which you will never understand and hopefully never have to refer to. The moment you ever have to, in a partnership, go to refer to an agreement, that partnership is over, because you'll only do it at a time. So the best relationships or the best deals are where we've never looked at the agreement after the agreement is signed. Spend a lot of time right in the beginning, upfront, understanding, getting to a common understanding. If you have a nice person on the other side, 9 out of 10 chances are you'll be able to resolve your issues. That does not undermine the importance of the legal process, because like Rohan rightly said, that is for the time, that is to protect you if things go bad, and that needs to be there as your backup, and that will take time and so on. But in my mind, the deal is made the moment the guy opposite and me, if I have trust and we have a common understanding written in simple, plain English on a piece of paper. It can just be 20 points, fine. But at least once we have it, then 9 out of 10 parts of the deal to me are over. Then I pay lots and lots of dollars to get it converted into 500 pages that I don't understand.
Very well said. So you got a third angle to it. Not the vulture, not Lakshmi, but the cheetah, the new age way of doing deals. And like the typical Punjabi banya in you, just let's put it on one sheet and get everything over with there. Very well said, Ashish. Now, Bhaskar, to you this question, and this is to do with the new business that you are sharing. So COVID and lockdown is going to change and make people relook at all the negotiations done in the pre-COVID times. What is your opinion? Will there be greater disputes or a lot of compromises?
Frankly, I know you're talking about the airline business.
Yes.
The jury is still out, and my own thinking is a lot influenced by certainly how we think about things in the Tata Group. So let me start by saying, right in the beginning, I was very aggressive on this subject, because this is the usual stuff, saying force majeure, we can call upon that and invoke force majeure. I'm not talking about airplane purchases, lease payments, and so on and so forth, that you can withhold. I think in retail also there's a lot going on about not paying rents to mall owners and so on and so forth. I think, it was not Rakesh, I think Rohan said this, and I value that a great deal. This is not a one-day affair. This is not a 6-month COVID affair. You have to deal with these people much later. Is the same aircraft maker Boeing or the same aircraft maker, Airbus, or the same leasing company who you're going to go back to? So that relationship is extremely important. And therefore, establishing that both of us have a problem. In fact, it's an industry problem. How can we navigate through this together rather than be in a conflicting situation? So I you know, they spoke about the cheetah and the vulture. I'm almost saying, can we all, we are birds of a feather, can we all fly together? You know, instead of flying against the wind, because, you know, airline is going nowhere, we're going to bleed a lot. So, you know, Chairman Chandra said this, he said there is a BC, which is before COVID, and then there is a DC, which is during COVID, and then there is an AC, which is after COVID. For each of those, how we run our companies is different. Before COVID, we know what happened. But during COVID, it is every day. It is every day. Do you know, in airline, we are in negative revenue situation. I'm not about losses. We have to refund money and you have no income. Okay, so there is a negative revenue. But because of that, you can't run to your lessors and say, look, I'm not paying the 787 lease which has landed on the 4th of March in India, and I'm not going to pay the lease rent. Now that simply, unless both agree, saying I have a problem, can you defer the payment? So this is the way we are working. It is an everyday affair. So when it comes to airline, it is this: can we fly together? Because we have a longer destination to go to, and there's no point, invoking force majeure and so on and so forth. It is a situation which nobody willed and nobody is able to control. But we still have to live our life, and we have to live a life much after COVID. And therefore, can we fly together? It's not easy because there are many people who want many things in this. So multiple stakeholder view, and therefore can you take all the stakeholders with you is on the journey, is my view, and I stand by that view. And in fact, the biggest problem that has come up in the airline industry, and I'm being candid with you guys, which is there is a standoff between government and airlines. And I think it's the worst situation that can happen, you know, with the airline saying we won't refund money and the government in a bind, you know, because there is a public interest litigation in the Supreme Court saying airlines are not refunding us the money. Now, I feel, you know, there is a customer who needs the money and we are sitting on money. Now, I'm going totally against the whole airline industry's view on this subject. But you need that customer to fly with you later, isn't it? It's not that COVID ka uska 10,000 rupiya jo aapne liya hai, that is going to make or break you. I don't know, some airlines do feel that it might break them. So again, you know, versus government versus with government is again my point on, you asked the question about COVID and I'm answering specifically for COVID and airlines.
So wonderful. So what you are saying, that what you will see is a lot of compromises that will bring success rather than disputes. And the fact of the matter is that we all need to keep our eye on one thing, that customer first, the client first, and to take care of our customers, because they're not going to go away, they're not going to disappear. Now, my last question for the day is to all three of you, and this is a one-line answer from all three. What is the one feeling that you look for when you get up after closing a deal? So Rohan, would you like to start first? One line, what the feeling?
Mutual respect and mutual motivation.
Lovely. Ashish?
I feel that iske saath kaam karne mein maza aayega. You know, I want to get off with that feeling.
Great. And Bhaskar, what about you?
The guy in front of me says, can I open the Blue Label and can we go and have a drink together?
All three very candid and wonderful answers. So what they've talked about in this whole art, science and discipline of negotiation is it's all about the people you are negotiating with, building trust, building relationships, doing it in fairness, thinking long term, and having a negotiation that goes just beyond commercial terms. If I have to put it in a nutshell, I would like to thank the audience and my panel, three great leaders here, and of course the fourth one who had to leave early. Four of them visionaries, great visionaries, and leaders in their own fields, and have also been my mentor and also been great learning for me in the last 2.5 decades as I've met, as each one of them have touched my life. Thank you once again, and for showing me the great respect that on my one request in such a short time, you'll all four agreed to be a part of this panel. Thank you very much on behalf of Mindspeak, the Jewelry Fraternity, and myself.
Thank you, Biren.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you, Rohan.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Rohan.
Thank you, Ashok Bhai.
I would also like to thank you, all of you, for participating in this wonderful session. There are a huge number of notes that we have made, and there are some amazing replies that were given to you by this excavator, Mr. Biren Vaidya, who has excavated so much information out of you people, and he's done a fantastic job, I must say that. Biren Bhai, this has been a really interesting and a very entertaining discussion that every single person in this industry, we never believed something like a negotiation could be an element of a webinar, but I think you made one, and you made it a successful one. So I must also thank Ashish ji for giving us a lovely time. Bhaskar, thank you so much for your time, and then Rohan, again, thank you so much that you always stand by and have shared a lot of good insight. Rakesh ji, also thanks to him, though he's left early. And tomorrow, friends, we have a wonderful webinar on the vivid colors of gemstones. And this is all about the color stone world. And we have a wonderful panel tomorrow, which includes Mehernosh Hiramanek, Jay Sagar, Kamal Punjabi, Gautam Banerjee, Arun Jain, Dharmendra Ji Tank, and it is moderated by Mr. Rajiv Jain. So hopefully see you guys tomorrow, and we'll have a wonderful time again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Bhaskar ji. Thank you, Ashish ji, and thank you, Rohan bhai. Biren bhai, thank you very much
Thank you,
to be a
Robert.
good moderator. Thank you very much from me, Team Mindspeak.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.